All right, very good. We're live. Hey, it's me, Bill Patton. I'm here with Styrling Strother, my very good friend, and um, just very, very brief introductions. I've been teaching for 34 years and have written 7 books, and been studying a lot of neuroscience lately. So um, this has mostly been inspired by the fact that I wrote a book called Visual Training for Tennis, and then realized that probably a better place to start is the brain. All right, Sterling, why don't you do a quick intro?
I'm Styrling Strother. I have also been teaching tennis uh, for about 30 years, and met Bill 8 years ago, and we just kind of hit it off. I'm on the East Coast, he's on the West Coast, so we made that connection, and we've done a lot of cool collaboration things together. Train high performance players. Currently working with a player on the ATP tour with strategy and tactics. So that's kind of my niche and my specialty. And I like this idea because I really use a lot of psychology, thinking, processing thought in my teaching. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
All right. So raise your hand if you've ever been accused of being hyperactive. Okay. So that's both of us. And the inspiration for this talk was that we wanted to do something about ADHD. And the more we thought about it, was like, okay, that's probably something we want to talk about, but that's not really the main topic. Um, so the main, and Sterling, you said it earlier when we were getting ready, um, that you had a very crystal clear vision of what it is that you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, one of the things that I've really been working through in my own mind, Bill, and also with my players on court, is this idea of attention. So I actually looked up the word attention because I thought I knew what it meant, but I found very interesting. It's actually the pure definition is directed thought. So when we direct our thoughts to anything, we give it our attention. And so most of the time, our thoughts are scattered and they're just all over the place. And I think one of the problems why we have scattered thoughts is there's a lack of silence in our lives. With social media, with Instagram, I mean, the reels, like you were talking about the reels, that we just filter through all this information so quickly, and it's all day long. We're constantly having screen time with ourselves. This lack of silence, I believe, is one of the root causes why our attention is so scattered. And so that's kind of what I've been on lately, and I've been working with all my players about showing them their really directing their thoughts so that they can give something their attention, whether it's the forehand, the serve, or we're working on strategy and things like that.
Yeah. And I wanted to, piggyback on that as well, because, when you look at the word attention, the root of it is attend, right? So, and how do you attend? You are present. So part of it is being fully present with what you're doing. Um, these days, people would be very surprised to find out that formerly I was, had extreme hyperactivity disorder and was on heavy doses of Ritalin. Um, Nowadays, people sort of call me this a Zen tennis coach, and I don't know. It's funny because I think I went through a phase with the inner game of tennis, but now I would say that I'm just trying to have good habits when it comes to how I use my brain. And that seems to me to be the way out for a lot of people who tell themselves that they have ADHD. They've never had a diagnosis, but they're, or maybe they have had a diagnosis. And, we'd rather see people, learn their way out of it than take a pill their way out of it. So, what are some of those strategies that help people develop their ability to have attention?
I think one of the places we have to start is our programming. And so we were talking about this earlier. programming is really where everything starts. And I asked you the question, Bill, does thinking initiate programming? Okay. And when we think, it initiates everything that happens with our body, right? Like I tell my players all the time, our hand is dumb. Okay. The brain tells the hand what to do, how to hit a forehand, right? You have to think through what you want to accomplish. Okay. Do you want to hit the forehand with top spin or underspin or whatever it might be? But it initiates thinking. And so the programming is really where everything begins, because programming leads to beliefs, beliefs lead to attitudes, attitudes to feelings, and our feelings lead us to action. And so we've got to back it all the way up to programming and address this idea of, does thinking initiate programming? What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, we did have this conversation earlier. And so it's clearly chicken, meat, egg, right? So, but so it's all this process. And I think there's ancient wisdom here, so, in the Bible, it says, renew your mind, right? And, and then
Be
elsewhere,
transformed by the renewing of your
be
mind.
transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? And then, in other places, it talks about how, this action becomes that habit, becomes that trait, becomes that, destiny. So, and, I think back to, the old story about the, the, uh, the smith who didn't want to go to work, right? So he didn't make the nail, and then the nail, wasn't made, and then the horseshoe fell off, and then the horse didn't, broke its leg, and then the message didn't get there, and then the battle was lost, and because of the battle being lost, then the war was lost. And it's like that. So these little things that we do. But now, to trace that back, there's a new theory that just came out a couple of weeks ago that was just published, that all decision making is unconscious, but that you become conscious of your decisions about a half a second later. And to me, that is really fascinating, and that fits really well with a lot of the ways that I approach players, is that I assume that they don't know what drives their decision making when they first come to me. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing, and that's why they want help, right? And so we get to work on it, and we start programming their way forward. So, we say, all right, when you see a ball like this, do that, and then, it takes time of them consciously deciding to do that before it becomes an unconscious thing. I'll give you an example. I have a junior who is wants to get recruited to play college tennis, and I had her as a hitting partner with a guy who wants to become a 5-0 very shortly. And he's in his 40s, but he's really got his work cut out for him to get back to that level. So, a couple of different scenarios. There were a couple of times when I knew he knew what he wanted to do, and he was in position to do something that he wanted to do, but he didn't execute. And so I just very quietly went up to him and I said, it's going to be in a couple of weeks, you're going to hit a slice approach shot on that, and you're going to come in, you're going to close that out. That's what's going to happen. And so feeding that thought of that nascent activity that he wasn't quite ready to perform because he hasn't been at the top of his game for a little while, but it will come back. But feeding that thought so that can germinate and become that performance later.
Yeah, it reminds me about when I'm on the court with someone, And I want to digress back to the whole silence, being more silent in your thoughts, right? Quieting your thoughts. So many times, like you're training a player and they want to hit a particular shot, but the problem is that they're so focused on the judgment of that shot. Like I'm going to hit this shot, and they go, "Oh, that was a good shot," or "Oh, that was a bad shot," and I'm like, you got to move out of the house of judgment, and you got to move into the house of observation, right? And you've got to observe where the shot missed. If you missed the shot, did it miss long, wide, or in the net, right? There's only three places you can miss. But the idea of capturing our thoughts, I think we lost Bill, but he'll be back. Capturing our thoughts leads to the discipline of directed thought, right? So when we capture something, we take hold of our thoughts and then we own them, right? So you've got to capture your thoughts so that you can own them, so they can be your own. Because if you don't own your own thoughts, Bill, they will own you and they will control you. Your thoughts will control you at this point, instead of our scattered thoughts directing our actions. You totally just wipe me off the map. Okay. So yeah, so what's interesting is, like what you were saying before, when you see the ball come out of your opponent's racket, that immediately initiates thought of, oh, the ball looks like it's going to bounce here on my side of the court. And then that initiates, and all this unconscious, subconscious, well, not really unconscious, subconscious thought of the body reacting to that shot, all because you saw the ball come out of the strings of your opponent's racket, right? And so we talked a little bit earlier too about language, the language you use. I love your analogy. When I first heard you say this, I just died laughing. You were like, you put a tennis ball in your eye and you go, hey, keep your eye on the ball. And don't we say that to all our players? They keep the eye on the ball. Well, that doesn't help at all. It's like, so how do we change our language? Look or find the spin of the ball, like coming out of our opponent's racket, right? Find the spin. Look for the spin. That's an anticipatory sort of reaction.
Yeah, let me break in for a second, because I wanted to break something down. And then also what I've discovered is that StreamYard has added this feature now where you can do this.
Okay.
And then you were a perfect example of not knowing what was going on, but then you managed your stress of, where's Bill? But unconscious and subconscious can be interchangeable. I think there's a lot of overlap. I would be hard pressed to say what's the difference between unconscious and subconscious. But there's an element of the fact that it would make you crazy if your brain reminded you every second of the day, you're wearing socks. So there, and then heartbeat, don't forget to breathe, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot that your brain is doing that is completely unconscious to you, subconscious, not part of your conscious thinking. And that's great, because otherwise you would go insane. So we've got about 6 minutes left, and I think this is quickly spinning out of control. But one of the things that I want to dig into with you is this whole idea of deficits, and how people say, oh, well, I have ADHD, so therefore that's my excuse for not doing well, or what have you, or I have math anxiety, or this, that, or the other thing. How do we approach people who feel as though they have a deficit?
Well, I've dealt with this personally with players, especially younger players, and I had this boy, and I'm sure he was diagnosed with ADHD. I'm positive. But here's what's interesting, Bill, is that I I addressed his responsibility, right? I would talk to him about being responsible. In other words, being responsible to listen when I'm talking to him, right? To look at me instead of letting his eyes wander around. Like, here, look at me as I speak to you. And then using very direct language, not language that he would have to interpret what I was saying to him. So I would use very specific language that would initiate very specific action. And it is quite interesting because I could hold his attention where his mother would say, he has other coaches in other sports and they just can't hold his attention like you can. And maybe that's a little bit of my passion and my expression, but I do believe that I would literally call him to the carpet and say, hey man, you're just not paying attention to me. You're letting your thoughts just wander around. Like, face me, look at me. And then it just initiated this responsibility instead of, like you said, sometimes, and I'm not discounting he had ADHD. I mean, he was diagnosed and whatnot. But what I'm saying is that, like you said earlier, instead of just leaning on the medication, let's try to initiate this responsibility. I mean, we are powerful human beings, and we do have the capability to overcome. I mean, that's actually what a winner is. Someone who wins is someone who overcomes, right? Someone said, hey, I don't think winner's in the Bible. I go, but overcomer is. The Bible talks about overcoming. That's a winner. So it's like we are powerful individuals. We have a powerful mind. We need to access that. Well, how do we access it? By thinking through. And if our environment is too noisy and there's not enough silence for us to think. And I know when I go off to the beautiful North Carolina mountains, it's so quiet there, and you get settled into a chair with your coffee. I'll tell you, your thoughts start scattering, but then there's the atmosphere to capture them and go, wait a minute, okay. And so I think that's sort of how we should address this, maybe as teachers, as coaches, as just human beings interacting with one another, is, look, are we causing more problems for being hyperactive by surrounding ourselves or putting ourselves in an environment that's just all over the place? It's very noisy. So that's been my experience.
Yeah.
At least this individual.
Well, and this taps into for me, sort of my origin story of why are you even paying attention to what I'm saying right now? And it goes back to 2010 when I was in a pretty catastrophic car accident and had a brain trauma that was easily a 6-month recovery. And I think I trace some of my halting speech to that moment. But the interesting thing about that was that because I was having migraines and brain fog and lack of emotional control and lost most of my clients because nobody really wanted to hang out with me, I had to rebuild my life from scratch. So I had to be very intentional pretty much about every little thing I did. But the cool thing is that out of that, then I started to gain the discipline to be able to sit down and write my first book. So what looked on the face of it like something that had me wrecked actually became very much a blessing for me in disguise. And now it's 13 years later, and I've written 7 books with an 8th one on the way. So, but from that time, as Chewbacca tells me, I have a text message coming in. I don't know if you heard that, but one of the seminal thoughts that came from that time was that I had been signing up for every possible self-help email that there was, every mindset thing, was reading every book about success that I could put in my brain. And there's this one quote that I just really love, and it says, Discipline is remembering what you want. Because then I started to think about that. Well, okay, so what's the converse of that? A lack of discipline is forgetting what you want. So when you remember what you want, then you act on the things that you want. And I mean, it was really that simple. So anyway, we wait a second, I need to exit that. Yeah, there we go. Back again.
There you go.
So is there more that we really must say before we wrap this up?
No, I think that what you said at the very end, I think that takes it all the way back to the beginning. Is you have to ask yourself, what do you want in any situation, right? You can say it broadly about your life, what do I want? But then eventually you've got to dig down. You've got to peel the onion back. You've got to get specific about what you want. And just like if you want to hit a tennis ball on the tennis court, you want to play a certain shot. Well, what do you want to do with that shot? Why do you want to do it? Right. And so I like that. I like discipline is remembering what you want. Right. And a lack of discipline is forgetting what you want. And that to me is a great place to start to launch into this conversation about how do we tackle the difficulties of allowing our thoughts to scatter, right? And I enjoyed this conversation today, Bill. I think
I have one more thing I want to share. I have one more thing I want to share as a wrap up before we go. But I have this little group of 7-year-old girls, and so there are 6 of them. And our lessons sometimes devolve into chaos. And so it's like herding cats. But I will sometimes come and ask them what kind of tennis lesson do they want today. And sometimes I'll just tell them what kind of tennis lesson we're having today. But it was like the first lesson of fall. So I asked them if they wanted a pumpkin spice tennis lesson or a world championship tennis lesson. And a number of them said, world championship tennis. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Nobody said they wanted a pumpkin spice tennis lesson, which surprised me. I thought they would go for that. But then what that did, that opened up the fact that now we could take a more disciplined approach. Right.
Good.
You said you wanted world championship tennis. So here's what it looks like. Maybe you'll reconsider and you want pumpkin spice later. I don't know. But then, and that whole thing about, yes, look into my eyes, right? Listen to what I'm saying. And then I often tell them this, I listen to every word you say, and I don't let anybody interrupt when I'm listening to you. And now I just expect that in return. Is that unreasonable? All right. So you had some wrap up things you wanted to say, right?
Well, I mean, I would just echo exactly what you just said. I thought that was a marvelous way to get your players to tell you, or at least show you, what they want. Okay. So I would say that, first of all, if you're having problems capturing your thoughts, find some silence in your life.
Good.
Okay. Turn off the screen. Put boundaries in responding to texts, right? Don't just respond to every single text that hits your phone or every single email that slaps your email box, right? Put some boundaries. Organize. Start out with prioritizing your day, right? Make a list of what you want to do today and then prioritize it and then stick to it. Be disciplined in your thoughts towards your list. Don't allow these things to interrupt you and throw you off and scatter, okay, everything about you. So I think that's all I really had to wrap up with today.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on, Styrling, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. But I also wanted to say before we wrap up that in a couple of weeks I'm going to be on with Jack Broudy, and we're going to have some similar discussions. But we're going to talk, more about technique and how new discoveries, new theories in movement and how people learn how to move play into that. But thanks for watching. 25 minutes, a little bit longer than we wanted, but hey, that's pretty good, considering that Styrling and I can talk for a long, long time if we so choose. All right. Take good care, my friend. And thanks everybody for watching. Go ahead and smash like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. And leave a comment and we'll be happy to respond to any questions or comments that you have. Take care.